The artistic and creative economy of Vermont is not only a big contributor to the local culture of the state, as well as its overall image and branding to outside visitors, but it's a significant source of employment for many Vermonters. More than 8% of all the jobs in Vermont are related to this sector, according to the state's Department of Economic Development. And this diverse community of individuals and businesses together represent over 3% of the entire state's gross domestic product, the Economic Development Department says. So when the state's emergency order calling for non-essential businesses to close their doors went into effect back in March, many of these arts organizations face some agonizing decisions about canceling or postponing events and summer schedules they'd already invested much time and effort preparing for. As these restrictions have begun to be peeled back, allowing some galleries to reopen, although under different circumstances, they are trying to thread the same needle as restaurants, shops, lodging establishments, and just about every other business, getting back to work while doing so safely. We spoke with Amy Cunningham, the Deputy Director of the Vermont Arts Council, about the impact the COVID-19 pandemic has had on the arts sector in Vermont and where things may be headed.
That very first wave for us was figuring out and making adjustments for the grants that we had open. And then the next wave was about responding to the very urgent needs that artists and arts organizations had and have. And so to that end, we were able to invest to create a rapid response artist relief grant program. This is, up to $500 urgent needs for individuals in the creative sector, cultural workers, artists, who, for so many of them, they had their entire careers ripped out from under them. Even folks who had very robust careers with diverse revenue streams, things, if they were teaching artists and maybe they're doing workshops and they had performances lined up and maybe they had wedding gigs lined up, those things all went poof. So that wave of just a little bit of urgent response, that has wrapped up for us. So we've given, I believe the final number is 424 grants, totaling about a little over $170,000 out to individual artists. And then parallel to that is the support we're offering to cultural organizations. And again, this is about urgent needs, rapid response, keeping the lights on to weather the crisis. And so that's funding you may have heard as a part of the CARES Act in late March. The National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities each got funding that state arts and humanities agencies were to distribute to cultural organizations. And so we collaborated with our Humanities Council, the Vermont Humanities, to do a collaborative grant round. That I'm forgetting where we are with the numbers, but the money is very close to gone. And we've had a tremendous response and need. So that chapter is folding, and actually May 31st was the deadline for those grants. So they'll be processing those final applications that came in, and then making those final awards. So that was those are the Band-Aids, right? Those are the initial Band-Aids. And we know they're helpful, but we also know it's not enough. We had a forum to connect the creative sector with policymakers and legislators. And we'll be rolling out more of those kinds of forums and sessions, opportunities for folks in the field to connect, kind of peer support, but also connecting them with experts in small business or public health to help them plan and figure out what's next. And then we listened intently, like everyone, to the governor's plans for economic recovery, and figuring out, and we're right in the midst of making our case to the legislators and to policymakers about the real serious needs that the arts and cultural sector have, and also trying to really understand what the governor's plans are and I think we see ourselves as kind of the bridge or navigators for the creative sector to help make sure that individual artists, creative businesses, cultural organizations are taking advantage of the resources that are going to be available to help them survive.
Locally, some area arts organizations like the Dorset Theatre Festival and the Weston Playhouse were forced to cancel summer seasons or try to shift some programs to the virtual online world. Other events, like the Vermont Summer Festival and the relatively new but quickly popular Green Mountain Bluegrass Festival, also decided the downside risks and uncertainties of trying to push ahead and hold their events were too great, and those were also canceled. But as the pandemic has evolved over the past 3 months, some local arts groups are starting to plan for the summer. We talked with Ann Corso, the executive director of the Southern Vermont Arts Center, and Joanna Geneva and Ariel Rudikoff, co-founders and artistic directors of the Taconic Music Festival, as to their plans and the challenges posed by the pandemic.
Well, we will start with our summer exhibitions. We postponed our spring exhibitions, moved some to later summer slots, and moved some into next year. But the first thing that we will do is open our solo exhibitions with our members' artwork here in Yester House, beginning the July 4th weekend. So we are excited to launch that. The following week, the week of July 11th, we will launch the series that we had long planned, The Women Take Wilson, in the Wilson Museum. So we have 4 artists who are participating in that series, all women who are doing very different things working in contemporary art. And so, in this era, we are looking and following the guidelines very closely. I believe that our community is ready to see art again and engage in art. And of course, we will operate differently. But I think we can safely manage many of those regulations. We can add protective measures. We can certainly think about audience flow and make the traffic flow so that people are not in large groups at any one time. Some of our events and programs might look a little different. We likely won't have big opening receptions this summer. We'll think about doing those in stages or small groups or modifying those into online or hybrid formats. But I think by midsummer, we will be ready to make many of those changes to welcome the community back in a slightly different way, but hopefully giving them some much needed engagement. We've been pleasantly surprised at how well some of our virtual programming has gone. And we started doing that with our adult classes. As school was still in session and kids were already doing a lot of virtual programming by necessity through their own school districts. But it was wonderful to see that some of the classes that may, if they were in an in-person format, might have traditionally had 6, 8, 10 people. All of a sudden, we had people from across the country. We've had people internationally participate in some of our online classes. So I think there is now a new opportunity to expand some of our educational offerings and really cast a wider net.
So Taconic Music is going to have, by every indication, no guarantee 100% yet, but every indication is looking good, that we'll do 4 concerts this summer, starting Saturday, July 11th, and running contiguously until August 1st. We are adjusting, paring down the format to 1 hour without intermission. We have unfortunately pared down our roster of musicians significantly. And we have also, sadly, we did cancel our student component, the Chamber Music Intensive, which was kind of rough because we have hosted young students studying chamber music college age for 35 years and more in this community. So what remains are a group of dedicated, hardy players, anchored by the two of us, and they'll come here. We will follow guidelines as strictly as we can, as mandated by the state, and go forward with the testing protocol and all of the necessary measures that are given to us to ensure that the idea is to live stream the performances. So we're not expecting, nor can we have, large attendance in the Riley Center for the Arts itself, but we'll see what we're allowed to do. It could be as few as 10 people total. It may be as much as 25% of the hall capacity, which would bring it up to about 50 people, appropriately distanced and so forth. We just don't know the fine print of all of that yet, but we're confident that we can get something done this summer. And for ourselves, for the sake of moving forward in some way that's live and living, is extremely important to us. So we are just going to try our best and play some music this summer if we possibly can.
We felt that there's no substitute for live performance, and we were asked repeatedly if we will do some live Zoom, Facebook concerts, and we did not think the quality of the sound is good enough to do that from our living room. We don't have the equipment, and so many people were doing it that we felt it's just saturated. As much as we admire our colleagues and we watched a lot of homemade concerts, we would love to be able to perform live for a handful of people. It doesn't have to be many, but it keeps our soul alive as musicians. Not to have an audience and just to play for ourselves is simply not the same. Also to be able to see our colleagues. Some will come from New York and Boston, New Jersey, and we'll provide some isolation and quarantine time with that for them. And for the rest, we want to see them, and everybody is so enthusiastic to have a chance to play something live, because that's how we express ourselves. And to be denied that as a musician, there's only so much gardening we can do, and painting our garage, and house projects, and whatever else comes to mind. We have done it all. We are ready to play again. We're getting back in shape. I was laughing at myself because at first I thought I'm going to practice every single piece of violin repertoire I have not had a chance to learn all these years. Yeah, I have time to practice. I did it for about a week or two and then just lost steam, because without our audience we cannot really exist as musicians.
One way or another, the show will go on, and so will the art that will be produced as a reaction to the pandemic. That will be interesting to see. For the GNAT-TV News Project, I'm Andrew McKeever.